But I could imagine sitting across from one of you, and you guys were the GM of the Mavericks, and you're saying to me, "Hey, Dexter, how about we traded you Luka Doncic?" And I'd be like, "Are you high?" Like,
if you have time, we can't let you go without talking about the Luka 80 bombshell.
oh, man. I talked about this the other day on something I did with a friend of mine, Gerard Hector from True Hoop, and we talked about how sometimes things in sports, things are maybe a little bit more than meets the eye. And some people have been poo-pooing this and saying it's conspiracy theory, and I don't think it's conspiracy. But when you look at the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, Miriam Adelson, and where her money is tied into and what she's been trying to do in terms of legalizing gambling in Texas and all that stuff. She wants to build a new arena with casinos around it. This seems like a nice first step in the way to get what you want. Now, somebody said, well, why would she trade Luka Doncic? Well, a billionaire like her who's worth $34 billion, they don't want to pay $350 million. They want to keep the team below the second apron, likely below the luxury tax. They would like to as well, too. And you're not going to tell me that Nico Harrison, because everybody's giving him the fire right now, but you're not going to make me believe that Nico Harrison decided to do this just out of a whim and didn't consult with his ownership at all whatsoever, and that they didn't sign off of it. And most owners, I think, do not sign off on a 25-year-old generational talent who, I think we all here would agree, puts fans in the seats. Not just in Dallas.
For sure.
When Luka's on the road, people, he's one of those players, I'm going to go out and see Luka if he's in your town, right? You're going to go out and see him. So here's the thing, and this is where people say it gets a little conspiratorial. If she doesn't get what she wants in terms of the legislation and everything passed in Dallas, her money is tied into the Sands and all the casino money in Vegas. Where do we know the next NBA franchises when they expand? We know one of them is definitely going to Vegas. We know that's happening. What if she threatens to move the team to Vegas? Now, this sounds like a part of a long plan, but tell me how that makes any less sense than trading Luka Doncic for just Anthony Davis, right?
Fair point.
Who's a top 10 to 12 player. So I actually kind of feel uncomfortable with that because we're poo-pooing Anthony Davis as if he's nobody, but he's older.
Yeah.
This Mavs team just got older. They're now being led by Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving, right? Older stars. Nico Harrison said they're prioritizing defense and they get Max Christie, and now they trade for Caleb Martin. And it's like, okay, but you just got to the finals with a generational talent with your team. And you traded him in conference to the Lakers, and you didn't talk to anybody else? Why did you not want to talk to anybody else? Right?
Absolutely.
I think it's because it keeps everything under wraps. Nico Harrison is taking all the bullets now. Everybody hates him. Why are we hating Nico Harrison when you should hate the owner that signed off on this? That's what I'll say to that.
But if you play this out, and let's say they move the team to Vegas,
yep,
Dallas doesn't have a team. So
yep.
Doesn't Adam Silver want a team in Dallas? I mean, I assume so.
I would think that he would. I would think he would. I will say this to that. We've seen owners in the past use their teams for their own gain, their own means to an end. Seattle is a perfect example of this with Clay Bennett, right? We've seen it before. Now, you could flip the situation where it's like Dallas becomes the new Seattle. And then we're talking for years about, we got to bring a franchise back to Dallas. The threat of, I don't even think it'll get there, but the threat of doing it is powerful, is the point I'm making. The threat of doing it is powerful, right? It's powerful to get what you want in a certain area. Could you bring the team down, devalue them a little bit, get to the point where you're like, we don't want to be here no more. And now they're scrambling like, you know what? Let's pass these laws so we can keep the Mavericks here. Because then you have a lot of people outraged at the fact the Mavericks are moving. I'm not insinuating I think the Mavericks are moving. I'm just saying sometimes with this stuff, you got to follow the money and you got to look at things that maybe a little bit more than basketball. And when it comes to the billionaire wealth class, I'm never going to put it past them in terms of trying to get their bottom line. Look, I think we assume that all these owners care about these teams and want to invest and win, and not all of them do, right? Mark Cuban is an exception. Steve Ballmer sometimes is an exception. There are guys who are really passionate about their basketball teams and want them to win, and this goes in other sports too. This is not just basketball. And then there's some owners who just want to pocket money. I'm not saying that's Miriam Adelson, because I don't think she wants to pocket money. Actually, she wants to make more money. But people have bought teams before for other reasons. Bruce Ratner here in Brooklyn, when owned the Nets, a lot of it was about, I'm in Brooklyn, I covered a lot of this early in my career, a lot of it was about the development around it. But his money was in real estate. So it never really was about the Nets coming to Brooklyn. It was about how much money he can make about the real estate all around the Barclays Center. And then he sold the team to Prokhorov and so on and so forth. And so for some people, buying a team is a means to an end. And we have to accept that sometimes. Because if you did care about the fans, there's no way you would trade Luka Doncic. There's no way you trade. And if you did trade him, here's the thing. Nico Harrison, again, I still don't think this is all on him. He's got to be right. If he's wrong, right? The Mavs have to win a championship now.
Yeah.
Does any team have more pressure to win a championship than the Mavs? I'm not sure. They got to win now because if they don't, now if they win, he'll look great. Even I'll take back everything I said. I'll be like, you know what, Nico, you saw the vision that I didn't see. Tip my hat to you, my friend. But I don't think I wouldn't have the stomach to do that trade unless somebody told me to do that trade. I couldn't do that trade. It just doesn't make sense, guys.
Yeah.
Except it's great for the Lakers. They just reset their next 10 years. If you're a Lakers fan, you should be thrilled.
Dexter, you bring up so many good points there. And I think I'm at a stage where at this level, like in front offices in the NBA, even, and I don't care which franchise, I don't really buy the notion that there is like high level incompetence, like Nico doesn't realize the long-term, cost of trading Luka Doncic. Like I think there are owners pulling strings tied to this, certainly. And I think if people are willing to accept that all there is to this trade is what's on paper in terms of who was traded for who and just that general strategy, I think that's just a sign of, I guess, a great amount of naivety from the populace.
Yeah, I think, and I was glad Justin asked the question he did, right, about like why would Adam Silver not want a team in Dallas? Because I think I'm fine if we're going to have discussions where we're going to question these things out, right? We're going to look down the road and have these discussions. I'm not saying that there's something nefarious here. It's not the point I'm making.
Of course.
And I know you guys understand this. The point I am saying is that if you can just accept one truth and say that sometimes some ownership does not necessarily care about how it would invest in the team in the way that you should, the way that you may as a fan, accept that be true. We've seen this in other things from billionaires across other sectors. And outside of sports, we've seen this in this country. This is not me making something up out of thin air.
For sure.
Where people haven't necessarily done right by the people, right? And I'm with you. Is there incompetence in front offices, Matt? Yeah.
Sure.
But a lot of people don't get there without being smart, right? And sometimes some of the incompetent front offices, and we know this to be true from watching sports as long as we did, they're held back by really incompetent owners who meddle, who don't let the basketball people do the basketball things, right? That's usually what hurts a lot of these franchises. It's an owner who's like, I'm the one yes, they're the one pulling the strings. Yes, they're the ones that sign off and everything. We all have bosses we have to answer to. Nobody's just doing anything rogue. That's not happening. But I think the good organizations are the ones that let their basketball people do the basketball things. They're like, hey, I'm the rich billionaire. I'm funding the money. He or her is funding the money, and that's it. But I think the idea that owners don't have their hands in it at all is extremely naive.
Yeah.
In fact, Nico Harrison and somebody sent me something the other way. Nico Harrison and I'm forgetting who the other it was Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey were at the Sloan conference. I believe it was last year, and somebody had asked them a question about that, like what do they do when a decision comes, and they both were saying like, hey, there's a process to this. There's more checks and balances to get these things done than fans may realize. They both said this, and they're right. I know this to be true. So nothing's done in a vacuum, right? Like nobody's just like, hey, Nico Harrison to wake up and say, oh, I want to trade Luka Doncic. Nah, because he's Luka Doncic, right? Like, could you imagine either of you being at the end of the call? It wasn't a call because they said they had a meeting over coffee. But I can imagine sitting across from one of you and you guys were the GM of the Mavericks and you're saying to me, hey, Dexter, how about we traded you Luka Doncic? And I'd be like, are you high? Like, I'd be like, what, why? Like, I need to know that from Rob Pelinka. Like, but see, that's why I think there's more here. There's more here that we're probably not going to ever know.
There'll be books written someday.
Oh, yeah.
There will.
TV shows.
And the last thing I'll say, guys, I want to say this too long. The last thing I'll say too is I think you also look at the way some quotes came out immediately. I thought the disparaging of Luka immediately was very questionable. Obviously, these are, Tim McMahon had that, who's a fantastic journalist. And I'm not saying that what he got wasn't true. Not what I'm saying. I just understand how these things go. And when Tim comes calling and who fed it to who, and now Tim is reporting this and it's, Luka's weight issues. Well, why didn't you guys ever say any of this before? I'm not saying that wasn't an issue, because I think it was an issue in the organization. But so bad that you had to trade him? Allen Iverson. We've seen disgruntled stars do worse or be worse to the organization than Luka, and people didn't trade him. Allen Iverson wouldn't practice. He didn't trade him.
True.
Right? So, yeah.
Good points.
If I can, one more question.
Yes, you can.
We talked about this before on our previous episode, and I asked this to Alan. He didn't think that this was a possibility, but I ask you this. If we play this out, if it does happen, if the worst case scenario for Mavericks fans occurs and they move to Las Vegas, before that happens, do you see any way that Mark Cuban jumps in and prevents this from happening? In terms of, there's been rumors of him, running for president or other ventures. He loves this team so much, just to see him stand by and do nothing while this happens. I find it hard to believe he just, okay, well, they're not my team anymore, and that's it. I can't see that happening. I don't know.
I mean, short of him buying the team back, but I don't see them selling it back to him, right? Like, somebody, to that point, Justin, somebody had asked me right after it happened, they said, why would Mark Cuban have sold it to the Adelson family?
Yeah.
I said, look, because Mark Cuban's a billionaire who was trying to make his money. He made more money off this team than he ever thought he would have. He saw them go to 2 finals. He saw them win 1. He had a successful run. I don't blame him for selling. I think he does care. I think he really does care. Mark Cuban cared about the Mavericks in a way that he poured money into that team. He made that a destination, which is a good destination, Matt, that people want to play at. He upgraded their facilities. He did a lot with that organization that he deserves a ton of credit for. Do I think Mark Cuban would have allowed this trade? No.
Of course.
But if Mark Cuban had other interests, like bringing gambling to Texas, maybe he would do that. But because those are not his interests, that's not going to happen. So, no, I think he would try to do something, but I don't know how much power he would have, Justin. Like, what could he realistically do? I pray it doesn't get there. That's my thing. I pray it doesn't get there, because I don't think you want another situation like Seattle. When, I visited Seattle, and, just talking to so many people around there about the Sonics, and, when you bring up the Sonics to people, they'll just be like, you could just see how much it hurts them. It's like that they're not there. And Seattle's such a dope city, and a lot of great basketball talent out of that area too, in the Pacific Northwest. And for them to not have a team, I think is ridiculous. It was a great NBA market. So is Dallas. Dallas has been a great NBA market, in a market that cares way more about football.
Yeah.
Right? But they've been highly successful for the well part over 2 decades. I mean, a lot of that is because of Mark Cuban. And listen, it helps that they had an all-time great in Nowitzki, and then they had another all-time great in Luka Doncic, who might end up being one of the 15 or 20 best players to play this game, and they traded him away.
I have to add, this trade is also, I think you could say it's a direct slap in the face to Mark Cuban, because that cuts off a lot of his legacy being involved in basketball operations. Like, if you think about it, Luka was sort of his leftover bragging rights, that if they won a title with Luka, he's like, hey, I brought that guy in. Awesome. Whereas now that's a bit cut off. So I do wonder how things are behind the scenes there, even though he's still a minority owner.
I did not think about it that way. That's a really good point. It's a really good point, right? Because
you just had to sit and watch it.
Yeah. But no, you're right. Your point in that his legacy is in changing the culture of that, improving the facilities, arena, blah, blah, blah. Dirk, overseeing the basketball operation there when they had Dirk. Yes, he let Steve Nash go, which was a mistake. But you can't kill him for that. But then Luka to take over as Dirk was going out, and trading up for Luka when stupid teams passed on not drafting him, while screaming everybody to draft him number 1 this year, and teams did not. But whatever, that's another story for another day. Yeah, this does take this out. Like that is the last part of his legacy that still was on the team, right?
Yeah.
And I know you guys have seen this picture probably go around social media, but there's a picture of after the draft a couple years ago with Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic holding up their jerseys, and people are like, this is one of the biggest fumbles ever. It is. It is. You likely didn't re-sign because you didn't want to renegotiate with one guy who's probably going to the Hall of Fame in Jalen Brunson, and a possible all-time great. You traded him away. Those are not good moves. Now, Cuban's still on the team, but they were being cheap with not wanting to pay Jalen Brunson. Now, you could tell me nobody knew what Jalen Brunson was then and all this other stuff. There were things you heard. Luka wanted them to sign Jalen Brunson. He was not thrilled when they let him go. I didn't understand it. We kind of saw it coming. He did have his coming out party in the playoffs that year, particularly against Utah. But they had two now All-NBA players and one who looks like he's going to be an all-time great on their team. They drafted him in the same year, guys, the same year. That is one of the best drafts ever. Like, when people will look back, people will say, that draft by a team, first round, second round pick, that's one of the best ever. Yeah. And somebody's going to wonder, it's going to be, how did they have them on their team and not get them to play together for longer?
Our condolences, Mavs fans.
Right.
Condolences.
No, it's true. And I can see him flourishing in Los Angeles. I mean, it gets even worse. I mean, that's another element to this. Similarly to Jalen Brunson, the way he's led the Knicks, you imagine all of a sudden he wins multiple titles with the Lakers, and now he's associated with being an all-time great Laker compared to, I know Allen said he'd be more of an average Laker, but he could be a Lakers legend, depending on with his talent. I mean, that is fairly conceivable. He has the best mentor he could possibly have with LeBron James. Like, that is very conceivable.
Justin, it is a lock that he will be an all-time great Laker. Like, unless he injures himself, I don't see how this is not happening, right? Because it feels very Laker-ish for all of this to happen. And Luka's also the kind of dude that he strikes me as somebody he's not going to let this go.
No.
He is not going to let this go. The games when he plays the Mavericks are going to be must-see TV.
Oh, yeah.
He is going to kill that team. He's going to want to destroy that team so bad. You can see it now. They better not put, if I was Nico Harrison, don't sit courtside. Because every time he hits a shot, he's going to point at him or say something. I would not sit courtside if I was Nico Harrison because he's going to give it to him. He's not going to forget, guys. He will not forget.